This week, we welcome Dave Klein, Cybersecurity Evangelist at Cymulate, to discuss extended security posture management. In the leadership and communication section, 6 takeaways for CISOs from SolarWinds breach lawsuits, Navy SEALs 5 leadership principles that will transform entrepreneurs into influential leaders, more powerful people express less gratitude, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take 1/10 of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 261, recorded May 2nd, 2022. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joining from my Lone Star studio. Joining remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome, Jason.
What's happening, Matt? Pretty good NFL draft this weekend. Patriots really didn't pull anything special out, but man, Georgia put out some NFL players, man.
Yeah. It was interesting that the 3 Buckeyes receivers went in a row. I mean, Jameis Williams was at Alabama, but they were all teammates at Ohio State, which was a record. Like to have 3 wide receivers all from the same school drafted back to back to back. So yeah, and Georgia just rocked in this draft. So it was pretty awesome. Yeah. Also joining from the great state of Texas, Mr. Ben Carr.
Hey, Matt, how's it going today?
Good. How warm is it in Austin for you? It's going to get toasty up here.
It was like 86 yesterday. It's not that warm today, a little overcast, but yeah, got a little sun yesterday. Went out to a baseball game, saw UT lose to Oklahoma.
Oh, well, they're supposed to win that Red River Valley, whatever it's called, right?
They were doing really well until they let them have a 10-run inning, and then it all went downhill.
Right. It usually does.
That'll do it.
Security Weekly listeners save $100 on your RSA Conference 22 full conference pass. RSA Conference will be live in San Francisco June 6th to 9th, 2022. Security Weekly will be there in full force, delivering real-time live coverage and interviewing some of the event's top speakers and sponsors. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2022 and use the code 52UCyber. Hope to see you there. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and complete the form. We review those suggestions often and will reach out to you once reviewed. This segment is sponsored by Cymulate. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Cymulate. Dave Klein is the Director of Cyber Evangelism for Cymulate. With more than 21 years of real-world cybersecurity experience, he works with Cymulate teams, customers, and industry thought leaders to address the challenges of securing modern enterprise environments. Dave's long career includes working on the NIST response to President Obama's Policy Directive 21 on critical infrastructure security and resilience, leading some of the largest sales engagements for U.S. federal security solutions, and working with the city of New York post 9/11, helping shore up cyber defenses. Dave, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Matt, great to be here. Jason and Ben, hello too.
Don't worry. Ben and Jason are going to get plenty of airtime too. So we're going to talk.
Good.
Well, when you have two active CISOs sitting in the chair, I mean, of course they're going to ask questions.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
To comment.
It's going to happen. So we're going to talk extended security posture management. I want to define that term, but I want to tell a little story first and get your thoughts, and then we can get into defining what this concept of extended security posture management. When I was at RSA Security back in 2012, I was responsible for the Archer product line, trying to get it fixed. Long story, not important here. We also had NetWitness, the acquisition that we had done with Amit Uran and the NetWitness team. And one of the things I took to Art Coviello, and I was around 2013, was we had a gap between what Archer could see from a roll-up policy management risk perspective and what the NetWitness team had when it came to threats and things that were going on across the environment. And I pitched this concept that we needed a solution in the middle. And we looked at companies like Red Seal, Skybox, Core Impact back then as a potential way to help visualize vulnerabilities across the network to help prioritize risks. And then like a couple years later, like this whole breach and attack simulation market kind of came to bear. I think I was about 2 years too early. What do you think, Dave?
I would say 4 years too early. I think initially you're correct that the idea of being able to take offensive cybersecurity safely, right, breach attack simulation, to test your environment is truly the best way to find out if you have gaps, if you have misconfigurations, and most importantly, really optimize your security controls to be most effective. And I'd argue why I'd say you're 4 years versus 2 is beyond breach attack simulation. There were several other things that had to come into play. And it comes into what you said about prioritization of vulnerabilities, truly, taking it and not making it another thing, a dashboard that people look at and get overwhelmed, but truly understand in a systematic fashion of how to do things and how to fix things and what needs to be done first. I think that's why I would say 4 years versus 2.
Yeah, and what's interesting when I look at the space, I guess aspects of this could have been done by the vulnerability management vendors, right? Parts of it, not all of it, right? But they didn't. And so it created this like vacuum for these vendors to come into the market. And so I guess we're still going to define this, Dave, but my question is, where are the big challenges still? Why does this market exist? Because obviously somebody's not solving the challenges. And I'm curious, what's still the challenge that the breach and attack simulation vendors do that the vul management vendors can't?
So this is what it is, and it really comes down to two major points. One is the threats change daily now. Vulnerabilities, when we started, we had to track maybe 10,000 a year. And now we're up to 33,000 a year. On top of that, you have all the pre-existing vulnerabilities out there that still penetrate and still are in people's environments because they haven't fixed. You have enterprise drift. The idea that today with a playbook, you could push out with a mouse click, tons of changes, 1,000 new VPCs, instances of things like that. And you create all sorts of new issues in the environment. So you have all this dynamic change going on in the environment, and you still need to be able to understand offensively where your gaps are in a continuous fashion, right? And in the past, you mentioned Core Impact, great tool, by the way. All these offensive testing in the past required someone with a PhD and tons of experience. So in some ways, unless you're a part of the elite, you still weren't able to use this stuff. And I think what has really become wonderful about this solution and things like this is now it's able to be run in a continuous fashion It's accessible, meaning that those who are very bright could use it, as well as those who are just starting out. It educates as it goes, right? And most importantly, I think it's seen the light of day because people need to validate their existing solutions, right? Because as cybersecurity has hit, I think it's midday sun, it's important for everyone, every industry in the world. And the idea is it's gone beyond just the cybersecurity staff into the business side of the house, into the IT side of the house. So the concept is, I think the reason why this has been so effective is it means something for the business person, the IT person, and the cybersecurity person in a way that truly reduces risk, allows business to say, I see cybersecurity as valuable. I see the spend is optimized. I can do this without a heavy lift. I can get things deployed in a quicker fashion. And for the techies, they're like, hey, I can do this myself. I can educate my staff as I go along and be effective.
Yeah, we used to talk about continuous monitoring at Tenable. And the concept was right, but there were a lot of challenges with this concept of being able to continuously look at this. And to your point, what's happened is we've had an explosion of all kinds of things over the past 10 years or whatever it's been now, since I started with some of these technologies, right? As you think about the number of vulnerabilities, the number of changes, the number of threat vectors, the growing landscape, like everything's changing at the same time. So what was a challenge to do continuous monitoring back then is only that much harder now. And so I want to talk about this concept of extended security posture management, because I think I understand it, right? It's breach and attack simulation plus some other things that allow you to constantly look at your security posture to identify gaps to help the executive team make decisions about their investments and whether they're working. How close was I?
You're very close to it. And the key is that in the fact that it's made for the business, for IT staff, and cybersecurity means that more than just being breach attack simulation, more than being just continuous, being able to run in continuous fashion, the output must include three things. For the security personnel, the ability to understand what kind of risk is baselined and what is trend over time. And then most importantly, the output of these breach attack simulation must be done in a prescriptive fashion to find your first and third party security controls that you want to use to protect things, or if you need to patch, right? So you need to be able to do that and give this prescriptive information to the IT staff to make the changes and to be able to test again. And then at the same time, you have to show that the value to the business, right? I think you and I have been around a long time. We know we don't talk about buffer overflows or all sorts of other types of exploits and things like that with executives. We say this is the risk to the business because this is the way it is, right? That's what they want to hear. And so a solution like this brings all this stuff together to help you prioritize and understand your risk and reduce that risk and measure it. But most importantly, it gives back to those three roles, right? The business, the technical IT staff, as well as security.
And Jason, Dave, just a little bit of disclosure. In a previous role, in a previous life, I worked with Cymulate, and we used it for testing of existing infrastructure and software and tools. But one thing that we used Cymulate for that was a little bit, I'd say, outside of the box was we did it for proactive investment, right? So we actually used it to test future tools that we were looking to bring into the organization. So, for example, we knew we needed a new endpoint detection and response capability. We would bring in 5 vendors, do a proof of concept, have it all developed in the lab, then use this tool to actually test the capabilities. So what that did was allowed us to have a proactive stance and proactive exercise on future investments for my organization. So that way we got the visibility into the effectiveness of those. And we didn't invest in something reactively. So we used it for future state, not just current state.
And by the way, that's what we find today most people do, right? They use it first to optimize their existing controls. And then next thing you know, they're looking at that next investment, right? When they figure out where they still have gaps, and they're using it to pick the new software as well. And for me, that's so critical. And you think about things like EDR, identity, least privileges, all these things that we're now, multi-factor authentication, all these things that we're incorporating into our business. We can use this to show the value and the importance of it, whether it's new or existing. Very good point.
Yeah, no, I think it's good for folks to realize that this just isn't a current state evaluation tool. It's actually a strategy to help you for your future state.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly right. Because the use cases here are broad and extensive, right? So, I mean, to Jason's point, not only are you looking at your current technologies, but you can, as you start maturing your security program, start thinking about new things. This technology can be applied to a lot of different use cases. I was actually surprised at first. I was just thinking the common vulnerability management use case overlaid with my network security map, because that's what the old tools did. That's what the Red Seals and Skyboxes and Core Impacts kind of did. They visualized that piece. But you guys have taken this to additional layers and additional use cases where, to Jason's point, you can test future state. And which I think is very interesting. I'm curious how many people are actually using it to look at things like zero trust. And I say that in an interesting way, because when you think about zero trust technologies, right, they have to cover the 5 core domains of zero trust. They have to cover the device side, the network side, the application side, the user side, and the data side. And so I would think this would be a great kind of test bed to look at those 5 different pillars to see how they're working together to potentially identify gaps in your zero trust architecture. I'm just curious if that's a use case that's come up, Dave.
It is. And again, beyond just simple security controls, optimization and validation, you're seeing it used for all sorts of scenarios. That's what we call it for. For example, SOC and SIM optimization, making sure that when you have an attack, that the SOAR activates the right set of controls and also notifies the right person. In fact, the SIM is bubbling up the correct things and is showing everything, right? The idea of zero trust, the idea of being able to say, we're all working from home. What kind of risk does that cause that we need to think about and reduce risk for? Third party is huge, whether it's third party or supply chain. People are using this solution to say, okay, this third party vendor sits right in our data center. It's not really well segmented. How do we protect ourselves from that risk that they could have? And let's try different things, and zero trust is another example. You talked about attack-based vulnerability management. That's huge among all our customer base. And then even attack surface management. We're finding customers using us to do the reconnaissance work to find out what exchange accounts have been compromised. What are the controls on email? What do we need to do in additional? Do we have SPF records? Do we have DKIM? How we have it set up? DNS, can it be hijacked? Can we add records without being part of the trusted domain? All these different kinds of things that we're seeing people use us for. Phishing campaigns, being able to test their employees to see how they're doing. And then really bringing us into other various parts of use cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, Dave, when I think about this and I think about, where I initially saw this and, as Jason said in transparency, I've used a similar technology in a past life to do some of this, to use the continuous control validation. Like it always amazed me that this just wasn't sucked in by one of the major vulnerability management players, because it seemed like a really, common sense extension to what they were doing and to kind of get that validation there and assessment from a scoring perspective. And as you say, attack surface management, that's something I've been thinking about. Is this really seems like a core functionality to kind of a holistic approach to attack surface. And I'm just wondering why that hasn't come together more. I mean, it feels like we're dealing in a very fractured market still from an attack surface perspective. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on how, functionally this can be that foundational technology for that.
So the way that we've taken it, and we talked again about whether we're 4 years out or 2 years out, and why I feel like that what we do is not just a breach attack simulation. It's the fact that we combine a number of different practical use cases into one easily adoptable in a continuous fashion solution. Right. I think that the key is that if we were just an attack surface management solution, attack-based vulnerability management, we would have been acquired by some company very quickly. But the point is, we're doing a lot more. We're looking at all the different ways that your security controls try to protect you, and look at risk and how we could reduce those risks and optimize our controls and our people and our incident response plans, right? And the fact that we're able to do this and combine it into one solution, I think is really important for the ability of the people to adopt it. And what we're finding is that, yes, we're finding that even when we come up with what we think we are, we also see people say, hey, I'm using this for my evaluations to look at new solutions. I'm using this for ways that I didn't even think about, right? And stuff like that. So I think that's kind of what's happening, in a solution like this. I think also some of the key things that make this possible is when you look at the number of attacks that occur these days, we have all sorts of intelligence in the world about new TTPs and indicators of compromise. What is different with a solution like this is it makes it actionable. So by the time you're reading that, your news feed and see that there's a new exploit, new ransomware attack that takes advantage of Active Directory within 10 minutes of land and expanding, you're getting that actionable intelligence to test right away. So you're not spending time researching and coding and stuff like that. You're just able to test. And I think that's also extremely important, right? The fact that all this stuff is combined, but that you have the ability for multiple maturity levels, right? In cybersecurity, not enough people has been a problem for a decade, will continue to be a problem. The idea that someone could pick this up, can see the MITRE ATT&CK framework and see a good explanation of what's going on and what they're doing, so they could run the day-to-day tests, and that the real elite, the ones who are really good at this kind of stuff, can automate a lot of stuff that used to be take a long time and be resource intensive.
I mean, to that point, Dave, I look at this not only as a tool for the enterprise, but are you starting to see some MSSPs kind of jump on board for some level of? I see it as added value that maybe an MSSP could take on.
So we have a few MSSPs who use this, and we also offer an MSSP solution for people who don't want to run this themselves. Right. So internally, we offer one for our customers who want to use it, as well as having some MSSPs. For them, the beauty of it is it shows optimization of what they're doing, right? It's able for them to tell the customers, hey, here's how we're doing, here we're being effective, and this is what we're doing. So for them, it's a way to really prove their value. And we're seeing adoption of it. We're absolutely seeing adoption of it.
That's great.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the value proposition. You just mentioned one for the MSSPs, like proving their value and how they're helping to protect your environment. Because I could see how having those scores against the technologies that they're providing makes a lot of sense. But if you're doing this on your own, like, where is the value for how do the CISOs position this with the board or with the executive or the different business teams? Like, what are those key value drivers that people should be thinking about for a product like this?
Let's go into that. So from a business perspective, what we see is they're able to say, I can manage organizational cyber risk end to end. I can rationalize my security spend, right? And I can prioritize mitigation based on validated risks. And the biggest thing with that board is what we call immediate threats, is that they're going to ask the question of, hey, our competitor was hit by this ransomware actor, or this insider threat, or this type of very embarrassing PII leak. Are we vulnerable to that? And what the CISO can say is, you know what? We tested against those exact criterion, and we found a few things, and we fixed it, and now we're effectively okay. So the key is that from the business perspective, I'm good against the latest threats. I'm good when the board asks me questions to say we've tested, we know for sure. And then from the technical side of the house, you could say, I could do this in a continuous, safe, comprehensive manner. I can bring in the IT staff and the business staff to understand what their roles are and to prescriptively give them the output of what they need to do. I can optimize everything without having to have a heavy lift, without having to have something that takes a long time. It's easy. It can be deployed within hours, right? And I can use my existing team, right? And I think also the comprehensiveness, right? This is not just a checking the box for validation or having someone come in once in a while to test things. This is done in continuous fashion, and that's what I think the technical people like.
Yeah, so it's better than handing them the 250-page vulnerability report in your scanner and go, here you go, fix this.
Yes. Testify. And that was the problem in the past. The problem in the past is you'd show up with that telephone book, go, woohoo, look at all the stuff we were able to do. See you later, right? And you were not liked, you were not loved. And the key is now you're saying, hey, of everything we found, here's the top 10 things that you really need to handle. Here's everything you need to do to fix it. And let's test again, right? And so the concept is you're more of a team member, more of a partner than someone coming in with the telephone book and put it on the table saying you do all this stuff.
And I would imagine the next evolution of this is some tie into the SOAR so that you can do some of these remediations in a more automated fashion. I mean, what you describe is obviously important. Like, here's the steps you need to take, but putting that into a playbook and allowing that to have some level of automation at some points, kind of that next nirvana moment, I would imagine, for some of these solutions, right?
200%. I think that, and again, I'm someone that's been around the block and done a lot of different companies. I would say definitely, because we currently tie in the SOAR, but the tie in the SOAR today is more around validation that the SOAR is working effectively, right? Like if it hits a certain part where it errors out versus actually go through and launches something, we want to know about that. But the idea of what you're talking about, I do think that is around the bend, is that the next thing will be an automated remediation and things like that. Taking the security controls, using your SOAR to then click off and say, make a firewall change and stuff like that, or make an EDR change. And I think that's absolutely down the pike.
Yeah. Jason, Ben, any additional questions for Dave while we have him with us?
Good to go on my side.
Yeah, same here.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Had a wonderful time. Love to come back.
Absolutely. If you want to learn more about Cymulate or how to validate your security investments, please visit securityweekly.com/Cymulate. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.